Welcome everyone to Micro Society's new series, Adventures with Jaida, where we recognize youth activists who are making a difference in our world. I am Jaida, your host. Today, I am honored to introduce you to 18-year-old Nyla Gilstrap. Nyla has lived in Harlem her whole life. For those who don't know Harlem, it is a Black and Latino neighborhood in the northern part of New York City. It has a history of crime and poverty, but later developed a rich culture and is home to the famous Apollo Theater, a center of jazz music. Since kindergarten, Nyla has attended the Trinity School, founded 300 years ago as a charity school for 40 students. Today, it is a private school for college preparation. Welcome, Nyla. So first you joined as a member of the Black Affairs Club, and then you became president. What characteristics do you think made you a leader?
That's a great question. I joined Black Affairs Club freshman year, and my brother had been president before. And I think the reason why I was chosen to be president was because I was always showing up, always raising my hand, always talking. And I think that was a big part of it. I think I'm a communicator. I'm very comfortable with talking to people, talking to the administration if we need something, talking to other students, getting them engaged. So I think that was kind of my leadership style, is really not being afraid to reach out to people, not being afraid to say what needs to be said. And that's really been my role out of the other three presidents that I work really closely with, which is like a good blend because we all have our different leadership styles. But
if so few Blacks go to Trinity, who else joined the Black Affairs Club?
So it was the Black students and the Black faculty. We actually have a lot of Black administrators and teachers that show up, which is amazing. So some instances, it's just us and we're just talking. Other instances, we have open meetings where a lot of white students come, a lot of Asian students, a lot of Latinx students, because they're also interested in what's happening in the Black community as well. And they care about their Black students and Black students' well-being at the school. So our Black Affairs Club group chat on Snapchat is not just Black students at all. It's a whole mix of students who are just really invested in issues surrounding the Black community at Trinity and beyond.
You wanted to change the unfairness due to race that you saw, and so you kept expanding the group of people who could help you make a positive change. Is that where Black students demanding change came in?
So Black students demanding change came from these Instagram accounts. It started Black at Brierley. So students, faculty, staff at Brierley would anonymously, Black students, faculty, and staff at Brierley would anonymously share their experiences there. Brierley's a school in New York City, by the way, and put them on Instagram so that other people could see like what was going on. So that platform was also created at Trinity and Horace Mann and Fieldston, some other independent schools in New York City. And I think a lot of the people in the community who were not Black were seeing these posts and being like, wow, either I saw this happening and I didn't do anything about it, or wow, I really did not know that Black people in our community were going through these experiences. So Black students demanding change came about when someone in this big group chat said, who wants to do something about making sure that there doesn't ever have to be another post on a Black at Instagram account again. So I said yes, and so did about 30 other kids, and we all just formed our group out of that, with trying to establish racially equitable and inclusive reform in all of our schools.
That's so great.
Thanks.
Tell us about that. Like, how did the movement sort of come about in a way?
So after we decided to be a group, we spent so much time on Zoom, like going into 1 a.m. talking about what our name should be, like how would we do this? And we decided to basically create a list of demands. I think another important part about this was we had a huge debate about whether or not we should use the word demand, because at first it sounded like it was too like harsh and forward. But then we thought that we really deserve the things that we're asking for. We deserve a school that treats all of its students equally and makes everyone feel safe. And so demand is perfectly appropriate. Like this is what we need, and this is how like our school should be moving forward. So we decided to use that name. And we created a big list of demands that stemmed from everything from bias training for incoming parents to a curriculum that focuses more on that kind of decenters whiteness and focuses more on histories that are often left out of the narrative. And we also talked about like incorporating conversations around the pervasiveness of systemic racism into our curriculum, because so many kids don't understand how much of a problem systemic racism really is and don't understand the root cause of that and how that affects people in our country. So that was a huge list of demands. We worked on it for so long. I worked on it with some teachers from my school as well, and so did 2 other girls in my grade. And we sent the demands out and basically waited for a response.
How did it grow among other schools?
So it actually started as like a multi-school thing. And then I think when other people saw that we were having success, like the moment we sent out our demands, basically the next day, our school accepted to every single one of them, which was amazing. So I think when other Black students especially caught on to this movement that was happening at the few schools that it started at, they reached out to us and were like, how can I bring this to my own school? So then a couple people within our organization started an onboarding process where students could reach out to them. We'd brief them on what Black Students Demanding Change was about, and then work with them to create their own list of demands for their school.
What kind of stories of racial injustice did you hear from others?
There was a lot. Some of them were young Black kids being told that their skin looked dirty, students being looked at in a different way or weirdly when slavery was brought up, Black students always being asked to speak on behalf of the entire Black community when they're really just one person. We saw a lot of instances of parents thinking that young Black kids were the nanny and like weren't actually attending our school. So just a lot of stuff, like a lot of instances like that. Some were so little, but when that happens, they build up to be such a big thing. And I think that's what the Instagram account showed, was how these little things can really pile on top of each other and really cause damage in a student's psyche.
What has it been like for you growing up in a neighborhood like Harlem and going to a private school?
Well, I've always really been in love with my neighborhood. I'm biracial. My dad's Black and my mom's white. And at my school, which is predominantly white, I didn't have the opportunity to see a lot of people that look like me. So I really enjoyed living in Harlem, where the majority of the faces I saw were faces that looked like mine. And it was always a very homey feeling. My grandma also lived there. So it was great having that balance of going to a school where I didn't see a lot of people that looked like me and then coming home and seeing people that did.
So why do you think that you didn't just leave Trinity and go to school with more students who did look like you?
That's a good question. I think my dad actually went to Trinity. So my parents were very set on me attending there, I think, because they knew it would give me a great education. And so going in kindergarten, I didn't really know much and I didn't have a choice. My older brother also went. So I stayed through. And at one point I was considering leaving at the end of middle school because I just found it really difficult being there. I felt like I hadn't really found my people yet and I didn't have any Black teachers and I was feeling a little bit out of place. But ultimately it was my parents that decided to keep me. If I had it my way, I actually would have left, but they told me to stick with it. And I'm so, so glad that they did, because I really, really do enjoy high school and I love my school. So yeah, there was a moment where I was considering, but my parents told me to stick with it.
Yeah, it's really important to be encouraged for who you are by people you respect. So I know that you became an activist with Black Students Demanding Change. Was there anything you did to help you feel better? Did you join a group? And if so, what did you do there?
So when I was younger, this was a new thing when I was in middle school. We didn't have this before, but some teachers created a club called Women of Color Club. So the girls of color in my school, there were like maybe 10 of us each grade. That could be give or take 10 of us. And we'd gather at ad hoc and just talk. So I think that was one of the things that was really encouraging and made me feel at home in that school where I didn't see a lot of people like me, was having those, ad hoc is our break after second period where we can just relax and do whatever we want. So we eat snacks and talk to each other. And, we talked about beauty standards, and we talked about our culture and what's on our mind, and hair, and giving each other tips and tricks for like making ourselves feel good. So that was an encouraging space.
What challenges did you face and how did you overcome them?
I think when I was younger, the biggest challenge was dealing with other students' confusion. Like, I had always worn my hair out like super big and curly, and everyone wanted to touch it. Everyone wanted to know why it looked this way, why it smelled this way. And as a kid, I was like, I don't know why I'm being poked and prodded like this. I didn't really know how to respond to that. So that was definitely a challenge because I didn't see my white friends experiencing that same thing, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. A lot of people, when they saw me with my white mother, were very confused about how that was even possible. And the concept of me being a product of an interracial marriage wasn't really on their mind. So there was a lot of assuming that I was adopted, or like it was just difficult for people to grasp that concept. So as a kid, it made me question my relationship to my own mom. And that was definitely a challenge. And I think another big part of the challenges was representation. It's so important as a young kid to have someone that looks like you, that you could look up to, that could guide you as a mentor. And in all my time at Trinity, I've only had one Black teacher, and that was my 7th grade math teacher. So that was really difficult too, because I think what a lot of kids take for granted is seeing themselves reflected in authority figures, and students like me, Black students, just never really had that at Trinity.
Thank you. Do you think being a part of a group helped you not become an angry Black student?
That's a loaded question. I think the angry, there's definitely a trope of like the angry Black woman that I was forced into. And while I learned that I had a lot of anger, I think that was justified in the sense that Black people, Black women as well, are just not treated as equals in this country. So that anger is justified. Like, as a little kid, I was like, I don't understand why I'm not treated the same as my white peers. But the issue comes when I would try to speak about this very valid frustration, and people would say, oh, she's just angry. Like, oh, look at her, she's hysterical. And that was a really big issue. And it was just a way that people used to dismiss me. And that's a huge, huge problem. I think finding a group gave me confidence, and it made me feel safer. But it definitely didn't do much to diminish whatever anger I felt, because even though I had this group behind me, there are still these issues out in the world that are extremely frustrating and difficult to deal with.
Thank you. So what successes have you had?
I think I have had a lot of success, or not just me alone, but me and other students who are interested in activism at my school have had a lot of success in getting people talking about Black culture, talking about systemic racism and Black Lives Matter and police brutality. In recent years at my school, we've seen a huge shift, I think, with how much teachers are like having their students engage with those conversations. We've had a lot more people of color come to talk to our school versus before, when it was usually white people coming to talk. I've had also a lot of success in finding my Black community at Trinity. In high school, our grade more than doubles, so we get a lot more students and therefore a lot more Black students. And so being the president of Black Students Demanding Change, Black Affairs Club, where we gather and we talk about Black culture and what's happening with Black people in America. That's been a successful space in terms of like finding and creating a home for other people. So that's something that I've been proud of.
Thank you. What did you learn about yourself and about others?
I learned that I harbor a lot of anger. I know that doesn't sound that good, but I think there are just so many things that there are to fix in this world, and only a certain amount of people that are really interested in doing everything it takes to get those done. And that's what it's frustrating when you're talking to someone who's not as invested in fixing those problems as you are. So I had to learn how to, yeah, it sounds like you can relate. I had to learn how to kind of be able to respectfully talk with someone that disagrees with me and try to get them to see it from my side. And that's been something that I've been trying to learn, is how to do that better. Something that I've learned about others is that if you really try hard enough, and this is kind of relates to what I learned about myself, if you try hard enough, if you stick to it, if you've had those conversations with people, there is empathy there always to be found, even when it seems like there isn't. And a lot of times people who are not aligned with you at all will surprise you in like coming around and seeing things from your perspective, or at least trying to. And that's something hopeful that I've definitely seen in other people.
From what I'm hearing, instead of keeping your frustration aside, you reached out to find other people who were feeling the same way you did. So, what about social media? Did that help you find role models?
So social media was a huge part of my development, I think, in a lot of ways. The first part being that because there were so few people that looked like me at my school, turning to Instagram to see like Black girls posting about health and wellness and activism gave me something to aspire to. I really felt like I saw myself in them, and that there was a community online that I could relate to that I didn't have in person. The other thing that's so beautiful about social media was that it connected me with a lot of other Black students at independent schools across New York City who were going through the exact same things I was. And we were able to connect on GroupMe. It was like 140 of us. And it just felt like such a relief. Like I remember feeling like asking myself why I hadn't done this sooner, just having a huge group of people that you could talk to, like send memes to, laugh with, that you could also just relate to on a personal level.
So, what did you do about the problem with so much fake news on social media?
That's difficult. I mean, fake news is everywhere. There's just so much misinformation being spread. And while platforms like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook are doing the best that they can to get rid of fake news and flag it as potentially incorrect when it comes up, they're not going to get everything. So the sources that I really, really trust, I always watch MSNBC. I read The New Yorker. I read The New York Times. Those are platforms that I really trust. I also don't really follow news sources as much on social media. I follow more people who are talking about their own personal experiences, which I feel like are valid. So in that way, I try to filter out as much fake news, misinformation as I can.
Yeah. So, you didn't follow sources of information, but rather people that you respected, right?
Yes,
Interesting.
for the most part.
You started working with Black students demanding change. Did other forms of media help you with your cause?
Well, they helped in the sense that Instagram was really how we connected with people. And we actually had this one instance where a woman who was an environmental activist had like 1 million followers or something. And she caught on and saw what we were posting about and decided to repost us. And so that really spread our name. Yeah, it was amazing. So social media helped a lot in terms of outreach and reaching out to kids who weren't from New York City about what we were doing. That just would not have been possible without it. So in that way, it was really, really helpful.
That's really amazing. So, as we listen to your story, it sounds like there are some solid steps that people like me take to make a change. Could you outline them for our audience?
Sure. I think, at least for me, it started with basically a big part of it was rooted in my parents, who always were activists themselves, whose parents were activists themselves, my grandparents. And when I'd come home with these stories that I heard at school, my parents would say, hey, that's not right. You need to do something about this. So it started from a basic understanding of what was right and what was wrong. It started with finding the confidence in myself to tell myself that I don't deserve this treatment, that I deserve more, that I need to be treated as everyone else does. So I think a big part of it was just rooted in really listening to myself and saying, hey, Nyla, like, you deserve everything that you want. You deserve to be treated fairly. And so that was a big step, and it took a while, but that was a huge step to reach. The next step was finding people who believed in you and felt the same way. And that came in the form of Black Affairs Club, that came in the form of that big group chat that I talked about. A huge part of sending out the final demands for Black students demanding change was feeling as though I had a safety net behind me of people who loved and cared about me. So that's step 2. And then the next step is just like coming to the realization that if you don't do whatever it is you're about to do, then nothing's going to change. And things have to change. So it's just that willpower of, am I going to do this right now? And then we press send on the email. That was the most nerve-wracking moment of my life, but we finally got there.
So what are your hopes and dreams for your school in the future and just your future in general?
I hope that Trinity, well, they accepted all of our demands actually, which is amazing, but I hope that they stick to it after I leave because I'm a senior. I hope that they do basically what is necessary to become a more anti-racist institution and finally be a place where students of color, LGBTQ students feel safe and welcome and are treated fairly. So that's my hope for the school. I guess my hope for the future in general is I want to start doing activism work on a bigger level. And I think I love to write, and I'd love to find a way to marry those two and maybe go into journalism and write about politics or write about social movements and try to find a way to incorporate writing with activism.
So one last thing.
Mm-hmm.
What groups that you described for us use the word Black? Why do you think they didn't use African American or people of color?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people tend to fall back on the word African American because it feels more comfortable for them or more politically correct, I guess, than using the term Black. I think it's important to realize that there are Korean Americans and Haitian Americans who are also Black and would not identify with the term African American. So the reason we said Black students demanding change is because we were talking about all Black students, not just African American students. And I think people of color obviously just means everyone who is not white. And that's such a broad swath of people. And Black students have different needs than East Asian students, than South Asian students, than Latinx students. So sometimes you just really need to specify what you were talking about. And we really were talking about Black students in this instance. So it's important when you want to talk about a specific group of people, not just to say people of color, because that encompasses so many different kinds of people.
Thank you for allowing me to interview you, Nyla, and thank you for your leadership in bringing people together to solve the problem of racial injustice. Also, thanks to all of you for joining us today. Remember, if you have a youth activist in your microsociety school who you would like to appear on our show, please send your nominations to us at bettertogethermicrosociety.org. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. It was so nice meeting you.
Thank you. You too.